The rain came down like it was trying to punish the earth. Marcus Odell Bailey gripped the wheel of his battered pickup truck, wipers screaming against a windshield that couldn't keep up with the storm. His hands were still black with engine grease from a 10-hour shift he hadn't been paid overtime for. His stomach growled. He had $43 to his name and a landlord who didn't accept excuses. Then he saw her. A silver SUV, tilted halfway onto the shoulder of Route 9, hazard lights blinking weakly through the downpour like a heartbeat that was starting to fail. Every car ahead of him swerved around it without slowing down. Nobody stopped. Not one person. Marcus stopped. He didn't know why. Maybe it was his mother's voice in his head, the one that told him a long time ago that character is what you do when nobody's watching. Maybe it was just instinct. Either way, he pulled his truck onto the shoulder behind the SUV, threw his hood up, and stepped out into a storm that didn't care who he was. He knocked on the window. It rolled down an inch. A woman looked back at him. Calm. Too calm for someone stranded alone on a dark highway in a storm like this. Her eyes studied him, not with fear, but with something closer to curiosity. "You need help, ma'am?" Marcus asked, rain running down his collar. "I'm fine," she said. But she didn't move to call anyone. She didn't reach for a phone. She just watched him, like she was waiting to see what he'd do next. That should have been his first clue that something wasn't right. He didn't wait for an invitation. He walked to the front of the SUV, popped the hood latch through the grill, and got to work in the rain. No umbrella, no gloves, just years of instinct guiding his hands through wires and belts he could barely see. And in the distance, headlights. Not one car. Free. Moving slow. Moving deliberate. Black SUVs, sleek and expensive, easing off the highway and rolling to a stop 100 feet back, engines idling, doors staying shut. Watching. Marcus felt the hair rise on the back of his neck. Whoever this woman was, she wasn't just some stranded driver. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and if you're new here, click the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Marcus kept working, but his mind was racing now. Who travels with an armed escort and pretends to be alone on the side of the road? Why would she wave off help from men who clearly worked for her? And why, every time he glanced up, did he catch her watching him instead of her car? He didn't ask. Not yet. He just worked. 20 minutes later, the engine turned over, coughed, and caught. Marcus straightened up, soaked to the bone, wiping his hands on a rag that was more oil than cloth at this point. "That should get you where you're going," he said. "Belt was slipping loose, that's all. You're lucky it didn't snap on the highway." The woman studied him a moment longer than felt normal. "What's your name?" "Marcus." "Just Marcus?" "Marcus Bailey." She nodded slowly, like she was filing the name away somewhere important. "Thank you, Marcus Bailey." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a folded stack of bills. Had to be at least $300. She held it out to him through the window. Marcus looked at the money. Then he looked at her. He shook his head and stepped back. "Keep it." "Excuse me?" "I didn't stop for money." Anybody would have done the same. That was a lie, and they both knew it. Nobody else had stopped. But Marcus said it anyway, because in his mind, that's what people were supposed to do for each other. The woman lowered the money slowly, like she wasn't used to someone turning it down. "Everyone has a price, Mr. Bailey." "Not me," Marcus said. "Just help somebody else when you get the chance. That's payment enough." For the first time since he'd pulled over, something shifted in her expression. It wasn't quite a smile. It was more like recognition, like she'd just confirmed something she'd suspected the moment she saw him step out of his truck. "I'll remember that," she said quietly. Marcus nodded, turned, and walked back to his own truck without another word. He didn't look back to watch her pull away. He didn't look at the black SUVs still idling in the rain. He just climbed into his truck, turned the heat on high, and drove home to an empty apartment and a stack of unpaid bills waiting on the counter. He never asked her name. He figured he'd never see her again anyway. He was wrong. 4 days passed. Marcus went back to the same routine, waking up at 5 a.m., driving to Delroy's auto repair on the edge of town, fixing transmissions and brake pads for a boss who paid him just enough to survive and never enough to build anything. He had dreams once. A shop with his name on the sign. A place where young black kids from his neighborhood could learn a trade instead of getting swallowed up by the streets. But dreams didn't pay rent, and lately Marcus had stopped saying his out loud. Tuesday afternoon, a car pulled into the shop's gravel lot. Not a customer's beat-up sedan. A clean black town car, the kind that didn't belong in this part of town. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, scanned the shop, and walked straight up to Marcus like he already knew exactly who he was. "Marcus Bailey?" Marcus wiped his hands on his coveralls, suddenly aware of every hole in them. "Who's asking?" "My name is Trent Okafor. I work for Whitfield Global." The man extended a business card. "Ms. Whitfield would like to speak with you." Marcus stared at the card like it might bite him. "Whitfield? As in?" "Simonides Whitfield," Trent confirmed. "CEO of Whitfield Global Holdings. I believe you two met on Route 9 a few nights ago." The wrench in Marcus's hand nearly slipped out of his grip. Whitfield Global. He'd seen that name on billboards downtown, on the side of buildings in Atlanta, in headlines about billion-dollar infrastructure deals. He had helped fix a stranded SUV for one of the wealthiest women in the country and hadn't even known it. "There's some kind of mistake," Marcus said. "I just helped somebody with car trouble." "That's it." "There's no mistake," Trent said. "Ms. Whitfield doesn't send cars for mistakes." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed with the business card in his hand, turning it over and over like it might explain itself if he stared long enough. His best friend Darnell called around midnight. "You seen the news? Whitfield Global just announced some kind of new community investment thing downtown. Word is they're looking for people to run it. Local people." "You believe that?" Marcus's chest tightened. "When this happen?" "Today." "Why, you know something about it?" Marcus didn't answer right away. Outside his window, the rain from earlier had cleared, and for the first time in years, he let himself wonder, just for a second, if maybe, just maybe, one small decision on a dark highway had put something bigger into motion. He pushed the thought away fast. People like him didn't get opportunities like that. Not really. Not permanently. Something always came along to take it back. The meeting happened 3 days later, in a glass office 40 floors above downtown Atlanta, the kind of building Marcus had only ever seen from the outside. He sat in the lobby in his one clean shirt, palms sweating, feeling like a fraud just for being there. When he was finally called in, Simone Whitfield was standing at the window, looking out over the city like she owned every inch of it, which, in some ways, she nearly did. "Mr. Bailey," she said, turning. "Thank you for coming." "Wasn't sure I had a choice," Marcus admitted. That earned the smallest flicker of a smile. "You always have a choice. That's rather the point of this meeting." She gestured for him to sit. He did, though every part of him felt out of place in that chair, in that office, in that entire building. "3 years ago," Simone said, "I began a personal project. Not for publicity. Not for headlines. A search for people of genuine character to help lead something I'm building in underserved communities across this country. Job training centers. Trade schools. Real opportunity, not charity. I've had my team quietly observing candidates for months. Testing them in situations they didn't know were tests." Marcus felt his stomach drop. The highway. That was a test, yes. Not the only one, but an important one. Simone folded her hands. "Do you know how many people drove past me that night, Mr. Bailey?" "No, ma'am." 14. 14 vehicles passed a woman stranded alone in a storm. You were the 15th. And when I offered you money, you refused it and asked for nothing but for me to pass kindness forward. She studied him. "I've interviewed executives with Ivy League degrees for this role. Businessmen with decades of leadership experience. None of them understood what you understood in 30 seconds on the side of a highway." "I don't understand what you're asking me," Marcus said carefully. "I'm asking you to run it. The Atlanta Trade and Opportunity Center. Full funding. Full autonomy. Salary that will change your life, and more importantly, the ability to change others." Marcus sat in stunned silence. Somewhere in his chest, hope and fear were wrestling for control, and fear was winning. "Why me?" he finally asked. "I'm a mechanic. I didn't finish college. I don't know the first thing about running an operation like that." "You know the first thing," Simone said. "You know how to help someone who has nothing to offer you back. Everything else can be taught." Word spread fast once Marcus said yes. At first, it felt like a miracle. His mother cried when he told her. Darnell hugged him so hard he nearly knocked the wind out of him. For the first time in years, Marcus let himself believe things were actually turning around. But not everyone was happy for him. "You really think a billionaire just handed you a job because you fixed her car?" His coworker Reggie scoffed at the shop, arms crossed, jealousy dripping from every word. "Man, wake up. Rich people don't do nothing for free. She wants something. You'll see." "It's not like that," Marcus said, though a small, cold part of him wondered if Reggie had a point. Then the whispers started. People in the neighborhood who'd known Marcus for years suddenly had opinions about how he'd gotten so lucky so fast. Some said he must have known Simone Whitfield before that night. Others said he was being used, a pretty face for a corporation that wanted good press for exploiting a poor black man's story. His girlfriend, Alicia, was the hardest to convince. Marcus, I love you, but this doesn't add up, she said one night, sitting across from him at his kitchen table, arms crossed. A woman worth billions just hands you the keys to a whole program because you fixed her car in the rain? What if this is some kind of setup? What if you sign something and end up worse off than before? I have to try, Alicia, Marcus said. This is everything I've wanted. A shop. A future. A way to actually help people instead of just surviving myself. And if it falls apart? If they use you and toss you aside once the cameras stop rolling? Marcus didn't have an answer for that. Because deep down, some nights, he wondered the exact same thing. If you're still watching up to now, type "I'm still here" in the comments section. The pressure only grew heavier. Whitfield Global assigned Marcus a small office and a mountain of responsibility he barely understood. Budgets. Staffing plans. Community outreach strategies. He worked twice as hard as he ever had at the auto shop, terrified that at any moment someone would realize the mistake and send him back to where he came from. Then the first real crisis hit. A local news reporter dug up a story, twisted, half-true, claiming Whitfield Global was using a poor mechanic as a marketing stunt to distract from a labor dispute at one of their manufacturing plants in another state. The story spread fast. Comment sections filled with accusations. Some called Marcus a sellout. Others called him a fraud. A few even claimed he must have paid someone off to get the position. Marcus sat in his small office that night, reading comment after comment tearing him apart, and for the first time since Simone's offer, he seriously considered walking away. Trent Okafor found him there past midnight, staring at his laptop screen with his head in his hands. "You should go home," Trent said gently. "How am I supposed to lead anything when people already hate me before I've done a single thing?" Marcus asked. Maybe Reggie was right. Maybe I was just a good story for them to use. Trent pulled up a chair. "Let me tell you something about Ms. Whitfield. 12 years ago, before Whitfield Global was worth a fraction of what it's worth today, she was homeless for 8 months. Nobody stopped for her then either. She built everything after that from nothing, and she swore that if she ever had the power to change even one person's path the way she wished someone had changed hers, she'd do it. You're not a marketing stunt, Marcus. You're the whole reason this program exists." Marcus looked up. She was homeless? She doesn't tell people that. She told you, in a way, without telling you. That night on the highway wasn't just a test of your character. It was personal for her. Marcus sat with that for a long moment. Then why test people at all? Why not just ask them straight out if they'd help? "Because anyone can say the right thing in an interview," Trent said. "Words are cheap, Marcus." She learned that the hard way, back when she was the one on the side of the road and people rolled their windows up instead of down. She doesn't trust what people say anymore. She only trusts what they do when they think no one's grading them for it. And if I hadn't stopped? Then you'd be home right now, still turning wrenches at Delroy's, and she'd have kept driving until she found someone who did. Trent's voice softened. "You didn't get lucky, Marcus. You got seen. There's a difference." Marcus closed his laptop, the comment section still glowing behind the screen for one more second before it went dark. "Doesn't make the comments hurt less." "No," Trent agreed. "It won't. But you don't owe strangers on the internet your story. You owe it to the people walking through that center's doors next month. Focus there. The trouble didn't stop with one newspaper article. A week later, the city permit office called the center to say there was an irregularity with their zoning approval, one that would delay the opening by months. Marcus drove downtown himself, sat in a cramped office for 3 hours, and eventually got a mid-level clerk to admit, off the record, that someone from outside the office had specifically requested the file be flagged for review. Who? Marcus asked. The clerk wouldn't say. But when Marcus mentioned it to Trent that evening, Trent's jaw tightened in a way Marcus hadn't seen before. Corvallis Industrial, Trent said quietly. They run 3 manufacturing plants in this state. Underpaid, overworked staff, most of them without a real path anywhere else. A program like ours pulls people out of that pipeline. That's money out of their pocket. So they're trying to bury us in paperwork. Paperwork, bad press, whatever slows us down. They can't stop this outright, it's legal, it's funded, it's ours. But they can make it bleed slow enough that we give up before we open. Marcus felt something harden in his chest, something that hadn't been there a month ago. Then we don't give up. That week, he barely slept. He sat through emergency meetings with city officials, personally walked zoning documents from office to office to keep them moving, and stood in front of a community board meeting where 2 separate men he didn't recognize stood up and loudly questioned whether outsiders should be running a program meant for local people, men Trent later confirmed had no actual ties to the neighborhood at all. You're rattled, Simone observed, when Marcus arrived for their next meeting looking like he hadn't slept in days. They sent people to a public meeting to make it look like the community doesn't want this, Marcus said. I stood there and let them say it, because if I'd said what I wanted to say back, it would have looked exactly like the trap they were hoping I'd walk into. That restraint, Simone said, is exactly why you're the right person for this. Anger is easy, Mr. Bailey. Anyone can be provoked. Staying steady while people try to bait you into becoming the villain of your own story, that's rare. It doesn't feel rare. It feels exhausting. It is exhausting. That's why so few people manage it. 2 days later, Simone called Marcus into her office again. This time, she didn't stand at the window. She sat across from him, no desk between them. I saw the article, she said. I'm sorry it's bringing negative attention to your company, Marcus said quietly. I don't care about negative attention, Mr. Bailey. I care about the truth. She leaned forward. The manufacturing dispute they referenced was resolved 8 months ago, with full back pay to every affected worker. That story is manufactured outrage from a competitor who doesn't want to see this program succeed, because programs like this shrink the pool of desperate, underpaid labor they depend on. Why would anyone care that much about stopping this? Because when people from struggling communities get real training, real wages, and real ownership over their futures, they stop accepting exploitation. That threatens people who've built empires on exploitation. Simone's eyes were steady. This is bigger than a job offer, Marcus. This is a fight. And I need to know if you're still in it. Marcus thought about his mother's voice. About Alicia's doubt. About Reggie's jealousy and the comment sections calling him things he didn't deserve to be called. And he thought about that night on the highway, how easy it would have been to keep driving like 14 other people had. I'm in, Marcus said. All the way. The next month tested him in ways he never expected. He worked 18-hour days building the trade center from the ground up, recruiting instructors, meeting with community leaders, personally visiting families in the neighborhood he grew up in to convince them this program was real, not a trick, not a trap. The first door he knocked on belonged to Ms. Patterson, an older woman who'd lived on the same block as Marcus's mother for 30 years. She looked at his lanyard, looked at his face, and shook her head before he even finished his sentence. "I've seen programs like this before, baby," she said. "They come in with promises, take pictures for the news, and disappear in 6 months. My grandson signed up for one of those. Wasted a whole year of his life. This one's different," Marcus said. "That's what they all say. Ms. Patterson, you knew my mama when I was running around this block in shoes with holes in them. You know I'm not some suit from downtown pretending to care. I grew up 2 streets over. I fixed cars for pennies just to help pay rent. I'm not selling you something. I'm asking you to trust somebody you've known your whole life." She studied him for a long time on that porch, arms crossed, rain starting to spit again in the distance. Finally, she sighed. "My grandson's 22. Good with his hands, bad with everything else. You really got room for somebody like that?" "I got room," Marcus said. "Send him Monday." That was one door. There were dozens more, and not all of them opened. Some people still didn't trust it. Some slammed the door before Marcus could even say Simone Whitfield's name, assuming it was another scam wearing a nicer suit. A man 3 blocks from the shop told him flatly, "Every time somebody with money shows up in this neighborhood, we end up losing something. Our homes. Our stores. Now you want us to hand over our kids too?" Marcus didn't have a slick answer for that. He just said, "I understand why you'd think that. I'd think it too. All I'm asking is you give it 1 semester. If I'm lying to you, you never have to see me again." Slowly, one by one, people began to believe him, because he wasn't some executive parachuting in with a clipboard. He was one of them. He understood exactly what it felt like to be overlooked, underpaid, and written off. But belief didn't come free. It cost him sleep, cost him time with Alicia, cost him the easy rhythm of a life where the biggest decision of his day used to be which car to fix first. Some nights he sat in his truck outside the half-finished center, staring at the dark windows, wondering if he was building something real or just an elaborate way to fail in front of everyone who once believed in him. Reggie showed up one afternoon, hands in his pockets, refusing to meet Marcus's eyes at first. "Heard you're taking applications for the training program," Reggie muttered. Marcus almost smiled. "You interested? I got a family to feed, man. Shop's cutting hours. I ain't too proud to ask." Reggie finally looked up. "And I'm sorry for what I said before. About you being used. You weren't wrong to wonder," Marcus said honestly. "I wondered the same thing some nights. And now? Now I know the difference between being used and being trusted. This is trust." He signed Reggie up himself. Alicia came around too, slower, but she came around, especially the night she watched Marcus stand in front of 40 families at the center's opening announcement, voice shaking but steady, telling them that this place existed because one night, on one highway, in the pouring rain, he decided a stranger's flat tire mattered more than his own exhaustion. "I still think you're a little bit crazy," Alicia told him afterward, hooking her arm through his. "But I'm proud of you. I should have trusted you sooner." You are protecting yourself, Marcus said. I get it. 6 months after that storm on Route 9, the Atlanta Trade and Opportunity Center officially opened its doors. Not a plaque with Simone Whitfield's name on it in golden letters. Not a press conference dripping with corporate spin. Just Marcus, standing in front of a building full of people who'd been given a real chance, cutting a ribbon with hands that still, some days, smelled faintly of engine oil no matter of the crowd that day, quiet, watching, the same way she'd watched him work on her car in the rain months earlier. When a reporter asked her why she'd chosen an unknown mechanic to lead a multi-million-dollar community initiative, she gave an answer that would end up quoted in newspapers across the country. I wasn't looking for the best mechanic, she said. I was looking for the best person. Skills can be taught in a classroom. Character can only be revealed on a lonely highway, in the rain, when someone thinks nobody important is watching. The night before the grand opening, Marcus drove to his mother's house, the same small rented duplex he'd grown up in, with the porch light that had flickered for as long as he could remember and the screen door that never quite latched right. She was sitting on the porch steps when he pulled up, like she'd been waiting. You nervous? She asked, patting the step beside her. Marcus sat down, the concrete cold through his jeans. Terrified. Good, she said. Means it matters. She looked out at the street, quiet in the evening light. You remember when you were 9, and you gave your winter coat to that boy at the bus stop because his mama couldn't afford one that year? You made me do that. I didn't make you do anything, she said, smiling. I told you what was right. You're the one who took it off your own back and handed it over without me having to ask twice. I stood there in the cold that whole walk home, watching you shiver, and I thought, this boy is going to be somebody's answered prayer one day. Didn't know whose. Just knew it'd happen. Marcus felt his throat tighten. I didn't do anything special that night on the highway, Ma. I just stopped. That's the special part, baby. Stopping. Most folks don't. She reached over and squeezed his hand, her palm still rough from decades of double shifts at the hospital laundry. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever happens after that, you already did the hardest part. You stayed the same person you were before anybody was watching. Don't let all this money and attention convince you that's ever supposed to change. I won't. I know you won't, she said. That's why she picked you. They sat there a while longer, not saying much else, just two people who'd survived a lot together, watching the porch light flicker against the coming dark. Marcus never did get rich the way people imagine when they hear a billionaire changed someone's life. He didn't buy mansions or luxury cars. He bought his mother a modest house with a garden she'd always wanted. He opened a small repair shop of his own on weekends, training neighborhood kids for free, just like he'd always dreamed. And every single month, the trade center graduated another class of people who walked in with nothing and walked out with a future. Reggie became a certified electrician within the year. Darnell joined Marcus as an instructor. Even Alicia left her old job to help run the center's family outreach program, standing right there beside the man she'd once worried was walking into a trap. Ms. Patterson's grandson finished top of his welding class and got hired before graduation. She stopped Marcus outside the grocery store one afternoon just to hug him, no words, just held on a little longer than a normal hug usually lasts. Even Corvallis Industrial eventually backed off. Not out of decency, Trent admitted, but because the story had already gotten too big, too public, too tied to a name people recognized and trusted. Sabotaging it quietly wasn't an option anymore. Sometimes doing right by people loudly enough was its own kind of protection. At the one-year anniversary celebration, Simone did something she'd never done publicly before. She stood in front of a room full of graduates, families, and instructors, and told them about 8 months of her life she'd spent sleeping in her car outside a shopping center in Ohio, showering at a gym she'd talked her way into for free, applying for jobs on a library computer with a 30-minute time limit. "I'm telling you this," she said, her voice steady but quieter than usual, "because I need you to understand that this center was never charity. Charity is something you give away and forget about. This is a debt. A debt I owe to a version of myself that nobody stopped for. And it's a debt Marcus understood before I ever explained it to him, because he'd already been paying it forward on a rainy highway before he even knew my name." The room was silent. Then it wasn't. Families standing, applauding, some crying, Ms. Patterson dabbing her eyes with a tissue Alicia had passed her without needing to be asked. One rainy night, almost exactly a year after that first storm, Marcus was driving home from the center, exhausted in the good way now, the way that comes from purpose instead of survival. He saw a car pulled onto the shoulder ahead, hazards blinking through the rain. He didn't hesitate. He didn't even think about it. He simply pulled over. Because somewhere along the way, Marcus Bailey had learned something that no business degree could have taught him: kindness was never supposed to be a transaction. It was supposed to be a chain, one link pulling the next one forward, stretching further than anyone standing at the beginning of it could ever imagine. Character is what you do when no one is watching. And sometimes, the smallest act of kindness becomes the biggest turning point in a person's life. Have you ever helped a complete stranger without expecting anything in return? Tell us your story in the comments below. We'd love to read it. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another cinematic story about ordinary people whose choices changed lives forever. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.